Join us on a journey where we unravel the latest trends, tackle your burning questions, and explore innovative strategies that are shaping the future of compensation, all with a cup of coffee in hand. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Comp and Coffee. It's definitely summer where I'm recording the podcast today. I'm in London and we are in the middle of a heat wave, so it's very sweaty and warm here. And I'm definitely thinking about the possibility of disappearing to an island right now. I can't think of anything better. But of course, I am here to record an episode of Comp and Coffee, so I'm going to get as close to that as I can, and we're going to stay themed around the island. And what we're going to be talking about today is how being in compensation can sometimes feel like being on an island, and why that's a problem today, especially when compensation has never been more visible or needed to be connected to business outcomes. So we're going to explore why compensation expertise has become one of the most valuable resources that you can help you get off the island. And we're going to think about how strategic partnerships can help you to achieve those goals around delivering compensation strategy. I have two guests joining me today. We have one return guest to the podcast, and that is Kim O'Grady. Welcome, Kim. I'm going to get you to introduce yourself in a moment. And then we have a new guest on the podcast, Jenny Walling, who is our Senior Manager of Comp Services and Benchmarking here at Payscale. So let's get going. Kim, do you want to reintroduce yourself to the audience? I think you were on a podcast a wee while back. We were talking about how to talk to the FD, I think, at that time. But yeah, please reintroduce yourself to the audience.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ruth, so much for having me back. I'm excited to be here again. So I'm Kim O'Grady. I am the compensation supervisor at Designer Brands, which I've been at for 7 years. I have to say, I love my job. Not only do I have a fabulous shoe closet, but I also get to work with some amazing people and get to work on some really meaningful work. And in my role, I support the US, and we have over 500 different retail stores. We have a couple different corporate offices, and then a few logistics centers that I support, everything from base to short-term and long-term incentives. And when I'm not working, you'll find me hanging out with my family in the backyard playing ball with my golden retriever or planning my next cruise. So an island theme is perfect because I love the beach.
Me too. Okay, Jenny, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ruth. I'm Jenny Walling. I lead our compensation services and benchmarking teams here at Payscale and have been here going on 8.5 years, really with that first half spent as a compensation consultant, working directly with our clients and helping them with everything from building out compensation structures from scratch to helping kind of navigate those complex strategic questions. And honestly, that's really where I fell in love with this work. And I was in such a kind of, I think, unique situation in that I was able to see firsthand from our clients just how much compensation really matters, and being able to see how beneficial it is and just the positive impacts it has on our clients and their employees. And so when I moved to the management role, it was really about, for me, wanting to scale that ability to help and to be able to partner with more organizations and really help them move beyond that feeling of being alone and on that compensation island all by themselves.
We normally ask whether you drink coffee or tea, but as we're going with the island theme today and it's so hot here in the UK, what would be your favorite cocktail if you were on an island, Kim?
I would have to go with the lemon drop martini. It's a kind of a throwback to being a kid with your lemonade on the beach. And so still tart and refreshing.
Lovely. And Jenny, what about you?
I think I would do a pina colada. I love anything slushy, and especially when you're on the beach, just that coolness, it's so refreshing.
Yeah, I might join you in that pina colada, I think. I always think that when I'm on the beach, I've got to have at least one pina colada. It's like it is required. If it wasn't that, then it would probably be a margarita, I expect. So we can all imagine we're drinking those cocktails. I've actually got water in a bottle here, but that's fine. It is later there in the evening for me, so as we're recording this podcast. So okay, so let's go back to the island and the compensation island problem. I mean, I know from having worked in compensation for many years, it did sometimes feel like a really isolated job, particularly at the time where, a lot of the time that I was working as a practitioner, compensation was still very secret. But we also felt very disconnected maybe because of the secrecy, I don't know, but felt very disconnected at times from my other colleagues in HR and also from the business. And I was kind of in a box, working away, looking at like kind of all the numbers, requiring very specialized knowledge. And I think another reason maybe why sometimes people feel isolated is because compensation teams are often very small within an organization as well. I think there's some data from our compensation best practice report that for comp for organizations up to 5,000 people, I think was the benchmark in our survey, normally two comp people is the average, which doesn't sound like a very lot. So why do many compensation professionals feel like they're carrying these responsibilities alone? Why do they feel disconnected, and why do they feel isolated? Jenny, do you want to start us off here? What makes it difficult for comp teams today? Why do you think they feel like so isolated?
Yeah, I think so much has changed over the last, even just the 8.5 years I've been here at Payscale. And I think kind of when I was thinking about, what are maybe those trends that have come up making it more difficult or having the teams feeling more isolated is, I think first, how fragmented the talent market has become. Pre-pandemic, if you were a company in Denver, you were primarily competing for talent in Denver. And now, remote work has completely changed that equation. And we have clients competing nationally, sometimes globally, for the same roles. And that added complexity of, that same role in Austin, Texas is going to cost something very different from San Francisco to even Raleigh, North Carolina. And so a lot of clients, I think they're starting to ask, how do I build a compensation strategy that's competitive in multiple markets? How do I attract the talent that I need without blowing my budget? And I think too, another piece of it, and as you mentioned, of kind of previously compensation was so much more private, but we've had this big shift with transparency and what employees expect to know and hear and understand. And employees now more than ever, I think, want to understand not just what they're paid, but why they're paid that way, and then what their growth opportunities look like. And as we've seen, kind of over the years, tenure has dropped and people aren't staying necessarily for decades at an organization. And so if an employee doesn't understand their compensation or necessarily see a path to growth, they're going to start looking elsewhere. And I think too, you add in that pay transparency legislation and the fact that salary information is available everywhere online. And there's so much information that I think too, it's oftentimes there's so much information out there, but not necessarily maybe the context provided, for their specific organization and how they handle compensation. But because of that, though, I think it's also made comp become impossible to ignore. It's not a back office function anymore. It is really directly connected to whether you can attract and retain your best people. And so I think when we talk about that kind of compensation island problem, it's not just these teams are small but mighty, or asked to do more with less. It's that they really are being asked to solve increasingly complex strategic problems with limited resources. And I think too, oftentimes without executive backing on how critical this really is. So I think that has been kind of one of those harder things there for them.
So all those problems, Kim, that like Jenny's laid out there, what are the risks when comp teams are forced to navigate these challenges alone?
Yeah, what Jenny said, I know this is a podcast, so you can't see. I was shaking my head. Yes, up and down. That's exactly where I was thinking. And it's gotten so complex, and there's so many different things that we need to know as a comp practitioner that it's unreasonable to think that one team can do this alone. And as a retailer, we operate in dozens of states, and each location has their own pay transparency laws, their own requirements, and they're constantly evolving. And so just staying current with all of that is a challenge and a job in itself. And at the same time, to what Jenny was saying, is compensation is no longer a black box. It's no longer a behind the scenes conversation that's taboo to talk about. And employees have access to so much salary information. They're having conversation with their peers. and they truly expect the transparency. And so we're not just making these pay decisions in a box anymore. We're having to help our leaders be able to communicate and defend the decisions of what we're doing. It shows up really practical ways when the leaders are asking, well, why am I paying this much for somebody in Columbus, Ohio, but I need to pay this much for somebody in New York City? And then we're remote, so we've got leaders who will have associates in different locations, and so they sometimes have to be able to explain that to their team because they're living in two different locations with two very different markets that we're competing in. So all of that, if we're trying to manage it on our own, it's really easy to get stuck in a reactive mode. And instead of focusing on strategy and moving the business forward, we're just trying to keep our head above water. And that's why having access to this expertise and trusted partners has become so valuable, because like I said, no one team can do it all alone anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, that growing complexity, growing need to be able to defend the compensation in the organization. And then I think, as you said, Jenny, the kind of like the strategic angle, like being, now connecting compensation to real strategic outcomes are all becoming really important. And as you say, it's like the job has grown and the challenges have grown, and the amount of things that you need to know when it comes to compensation has definitely grown as well. Let's pivot to like talking about why compensation has become more strategic. We talk about strategic compensation sometimes quite glibly, oh yeah, more, everything's becoming much more strategic, but that can definitely mean different things to different organizations. So when you both talk about compensation becoming more strategic, what does that actually look like in practice? Jenny, what strategic work gets pushed aside, for example, when teams are buried in administrative tasks?
Yeah. And I think when I think about it, administrative comp work is necessary, right? We need to process merit, we have to handle data entry, keep our processes going, keep the lights on, keep that train moving. But that's not where the business impact happens. And for strategic compensation, that's really where we're able to start asking those different questions of, how does our compensation program actually attract the talent that we need? How do we want to communicate our approach to our employees so that they understand why they're paid the way that they are and they want to stay with us? I think it's being able to take that step back and reflect and really focus on, for that strategic comp, about proving that return on the investment and being able to ask those questions of, we restructured our salary bands last year. Did that actually improve retention for those roles that we were targeting? Were we actually able to attract better candidates because of it? And when we're able to, I think, to operate more strategically, that compensation then becomes more of a lever for our business to be able to pull from to achieve its goals. And I think when we're working with clients, we see pretty consistently, teams getting buried in all of that administrative work and making sure that, hey, we're going through our day-to-day requests. We're making sure that we're keeping our market pricing updated. And then all of a sudden, 6 months go by and they haven't been able to have a conversation with their leadership about whether their compensation approach is actually working. And they're unable to answer that question of, did these changes actually move the needle? What was that ROI that we're experiencing from it? And really, because they're so focused on keeping the lights on, they don't have that chance or space, I think, to step back and start thinking strategically because they are so burdened with all of that administrative work. And I think that's a real problem because it means that compensation keeps getting treated as overhead instead of that business driver. And I think that's too where we see that gap of administration and strategy really showing up, of when you don't have that bandwidth or maybe even to the data to be able to know if your compensation program is actually working.
Mm-hmm. And Kim, as a practitioner, how does that play out for you, like administrative to compensation strategy work?
Absolutely. So with what Jenny was saying is, I definitely like to work in the compensation strategy world because it's so important for us practitioners to know what's going on in the business. And different businesses are in their different business life cycles. So are we growing? Are we trying to manage our costs? Are we just trying to attract and retain talent? what are the needs of our business going to be in a year? What kind of talent are you building? And so when we get caught in the administrative problems, we're solving yesterday's problems. We're just keeping the needle moving, but we don't get time to look at what's going on out there in the business world. What new and exciting programs are out there that maybe we should consider implementing because XYZ is coming down the pipeline to us. And so that's really like where I like to play, is in that space, and why it's so important. But I know personally there are times when we absolutely get stuck in those administrative day-to-day things. A merit cycle, it has to happen. There's certain steps. And so sometimes those are the times where you're like, I didn't get to go look at other metrics because I just made sure that things were moving along in that process. And I always feel bad as a practitioner there, because I'm like, I can do so much more. And I'm personally happier so much more when I get to play in the strategy piece and see where what I'm doing impacts the business, and making sure our retention numbers are good, and we're getting the candidates, and those declined offer numbers stay low.
So getting off the island and connecting yourself more to the business there. And I think one of the ways organizations sometimes get past this work in compensation, a lot of our work is very repetitive, it's very cyclical. And we are seeing organizations, obviously, they invest in technology to help them do that. And technology is advancing very quickly. Our own technology here at Payscale is advancing very quickly with AI as well. So that's sort of like, we are now starting to see the benefit of a lot of that repetitive cyclical work being automated. So that's great. It allows us to be more involved in the strategic side of compensation. But technology on its own isn't enough. I think that's what we see a lot with our customers. I think, Jenny, you're aligned with me there. Organizations also need expertise. And that's really kind of where we wanted to kind of go next in the conversation, is why is expertise today such an important part of achieving success in your role in compensation? So, Jenny, let's start with you again. How do services amplify your investment, for example, in compensation in compensation technology? Because that's kind of how we think about our service offering here at Payscale.
Absolutely. And I think it's, we see organizations buy compensation technology with the best intentions, and then oftentimes hit a wall. And, they've got the platform, they have the data, the benchmarking tools, but maybe they don't have that roadmap for how to use it. Or they have the roadmap, but it requires a level of compensation expertise that they don't necessarily have in-house to be able to implement it effectively. And so I think it's when you pair that technology with expertise, for me, that's the true unlock. That's where that platform becomes exponentially more valuable. And we work with clients to really understand, what strategic questions are they trying to answer? And then we help them use the technology to be able to get there. And so being able to see it as the technology is the tool, but I really think that the expertise is what transforms that tool into the actual business results.
We've seen, obviously, the way that we've supported compensation professionals has changed because the work that our solutions are doing have changed. And we talked about it, like more automation, a lot of the repetitive work being done by our technology. So how are we thinking about shifting the service offerings that we offer now to our customers as a result of that change?
Absolutely. And just as our platforms and technology is evolving, wanting to make sure that our services are evolving right alongside them. And I think it's also, too, a big one for us is ensuring that we're able to meet our clients where they're at in their comp maturity journey. And that has changed quite a bit over the last years of where clients are and what they need at different steps. And we see, with our clients, it may be a team of one who's really drowning in so much stuff to complete, or we're working with a more well-established comp team that's just buried in the manual work, so they can't focus on those strategic initiatives. Or even thinking too about, the comp leader who knows exactly what needs to change, but they're maybe fighting that uphill battle internally because their leadership isn't necessarily as compensation savvy. So they need that additional kind of neutral third-party support coming in. And so we really wanted to expand our services because we want our clients to be able to maximize that ROI on their tech investment. And it's not just about having better data. it's about having that strategic partner who understands compensation strategy, who can benchmark your approach against peers, and who can help you implement those changes with confidence. And I think that's that real insight there, that technology is critical, but without that expertise to know how to use it strategically, you're leaving a lot of that value on the table.
Yeah. And so, Kim, when you think about using expertise, like how have you done that in your role? Where's it really helped you?
Yeah. So, what's so great about using a third party and getting the expertise is that they have got visibility into all these different companies, versus I only have visibility into my company and my network. And so, what's great is having an expertise team that you're a thought partner with me. You're helping me. Data is important. Data is absolutely important. But what the best part is you're helping me build my confidence and my story to take back to my business to implement. And great partners don't give you the answer. Great partners help you come up with the answers. They challenge your thinking and help you come up with the best decision for your organization. And so I echo what Jenny says, that the tool and the technology is great and it helps to make my job easier, but it's getting the strategic partnership and the thought partner to work with me that is just invaluable.
I mean, you've made the investment in the technology. Let's assume you've made the investment in the technology. You really want to maximize that investment and especially show the ROI to your leaders of that investment, because when it comes around to renewal time, if you've had a tool that's sitting there and it's not been able to demonstrate its impact on the business, you're going to have problems trying to get someone to commit to like paying for another 3 years of that. And then you kind of realize that you're in a real problem area because you're like, well, how am I going to do all this work on my own? So it's interesting when, sometimes when people think about services in the software world, they think of it as maybe just implementation support. So you buy the tool, someone helps you set it up, they hand it off, and then you're kind of on your own. That makes sense for a lot of tools, but compensation strategy, as you said, Kim, isn't really like that. It's not like a one-time project. It's an ongoing, living, breathing thing that you're doing to try and react to the talent strategy that your organization's trying to implement. So, Jenny, what makes a partnership different from traditional consulting or support?
Yes. And I love this question because I think the distinction really matters. And Kim was kind of hitting on it too in her last answer there. I think for more that traditional consulting, that work often looks like, someone coming in, they run the project, they hand you a report and a recommendation, or maybe the main deliverable, and then they leave, right? And you're then responsible for figuring out, how do we implement this long term, or if we need to make adjustments. That's responsibility falls on you. Whereas in support as well, often I think it's reactive type of relationship. If something breaks, we're going to try and figure it out, or something's not working like it should, going to reach out to our support team. But I think a partnership, it's different because it is that ongoing, it's collaborative. It is us saying we're invested in your long-term compensation maturity journey. And that means that we're not just thinking about the immediate project, but we're also thinking about your bigger strategy and goals. We don't want to just focus on what you need right now, but also taking into consideration for those decisions, what are those short, mid, long-term goals? What do we need to account for if we make a decision here? We also need to be looking ahead. And I think when you're working with a true partner, they become that extension of your team. And kind of as we were talking about, right, not wanting to be alone on that island, but being able to have that additional partner where they help you navigate those decisions. They're able to bring those insights from maybe what other organizations are doing. And then they're also there when you need to talk through the different strategic options, right? As Kim mentioned, they're not there to just tell you what to do, but to have that conversation, and where it's less of, okay, here's what you should do, but it's more of, let's figure this out together. What's going to be best for your organization? and then let's make sure it actually works.
And you talked earlier, I think, about the way we often think about our relationship with our customers is helping them progress through the compensation maturity journey, which is a model we use here at Payscale all the time. We think about how organizations begin like their compensation journey, and if they're a startup or they're kind of a relatively new company, and then how they're progressing in terms of the sophistication of their compensation to support their business strategy. And so I do think, like, we work with our customers, we stay with them through that journey. And that's one of the parts that I love about seeing how customers progress on that journey. So I think that's a really important part of the partnership as well. It's just we're not there to help you at the beginning. We're here to help you on that journey. Is that what you find, Jenny, when you're like working with customers?
Absolutely. And I love it too, because being able to be here for a little over 8 years and being able to see how we've progressed as an organization in our comp journey, but also our tech journey as well. But being able to be right alongside with our clients and their same journeys and being able to see how they've grown. And that honestly was one of my favorite things about being a compensation consultant was the clients that I got to work with year over year and being able to say, okay, hey, I know last time we talked, you implemented some new pay ranges. How did it go? How was it received? Being able to get all of that, I think feedback from them. And it does feel like you have more skin in the game. We care whether your comp program actually works because it really feels like their success is our success, and want to make sure that they look good doing their job.
I think we all have that shared value. I know here at Payscale is like just the importance of compensation and the relationship that has, and the impact it can have on people as well. So I think that's fundamentally in our blood, I think, when we think about how we interact with customers. Kim, like expertise going forward, what things are you going to be thinking about in terms of like where you will need support in 2026, 2027 going forward?
Yeah, so we are on a journey we're looking at, skill-based pay. That's a huge kind of conversation. And so it's something, we've got job architecture, we've got all of our job description, but it's looking into some of the skill-based pay, which is a big topic I see that keeps popping up where I don't necessarily have time to fully dig into it myself. So that's something where I would look to the support of some expertise to look, does it make sense for our business? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And then maybe something else does. And then always AI, the hot topic, always looking at where can we utilize AI? What can help with some of those administrative burdens again, so we can stop focusing on the administrative stuff and get to focus more on the strategic side. And then always making sure that whatever we put in place is attracting and motivating our key talent, which is always at the heart of it.
Getting help with AI is important, I think, as well, because it's going to be so fundamental in like how we approach our jobs. So I think, that's definitely an area where many of us are going to need support in like leveraging AI and helping us be more strategic. So hopefully now we've talked about, you don't have to be in compensation alone. You don't have to be on that island all on your own, that partnering really makes sense, and it can extend the work that you do and can help to improve the work you do. So I'm interested, as we kind of close out the podcast, to hear from you both. What are your recommendations in terms of what compensation leaders can do today to make their jobs easier tomorrow? Jenny, do you want to start off again?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this, and it may sound simple, but I think it's transformative. It's start documenting your current state and really documenting it. Doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, but being able to have that clarity on, what is our compensation strategy today? What are we trying to accomplish? Where's our data coming from? And what are our gaps? And I think having that in place is so helpful, because once you have that map, that's when you can start identifying what's actually eating up all your time. And then also what's actually driving the business value. And it opens your eyes to be able to see, gosh, I'm spending 40% of my time on something that's not even moving the needle. So being able to have that clarity, I think, allows you to prioritize differently. Because I think when we're in so much admin work, we can just be stuck in the weeds, I think, here. And it also allows you to, as well, to have easier conversations with your leadership about what you actually need. I think that changes, it shifts the conversation, whether it's you need headcount or tools or partnership support. You're no longer just saying, hey, I'm overwhelmed, I need help. You're able to specifically go in and say, here's what we're doing now, here's the gap, and here's what it would take to close it. And I think that allows for a much more, I think a stronger conversation with your leadership and more impactful.
There's some great tips there. And Kim, what would be your advice for organizations that don't know how to get help and aren't sure really where to begin? Do you have any tips there?
Yeah, so I would always start by saying you don't have to solve all of your problems at once. And start by taking a look at what areas create the biggest challenges for your organization today. And then there's so many different tools and network and resources out there that can help you to get connected. There's your local organization. You probably have a local comp organization, and then building that network. And then they'll give you ideas of here's people who are great in these different spaces, and your network will help you find the experts that you need to get the help that you need.
And LinkedIn's obviously such a great resource now as well, like finding the right people to follow on LinkedIn. It really is such a great way to be able to find expertise and people that can help you as well. So, well, thank you both for joining me on my hot island today. Really appreciated the conversation today about partnerships, about leveraging expertise, and about how we can all grow as compensation professionals to be more strategic. Thank you both for joining me. We're interested to hear what you think. And if you would like to get in touch with us, you can email us at coffee@payscale.com with your questions, suggestions, and ideas for future episodes. If you are a Payscale customer and you didn't know we had services, then do reach out to us, reach out to your CSM, and you can find also details about our services on our website at payscale.com. If you sort of realize that that's an underutilized resource that maybe you haven't been focused on, then please do. So thank you both again for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you all on another episode of Comp and Coffee soon.